Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the New Bern Historic Preservation Commission. This is a specially called meeting that we've had in order to accommodate a larger than normal number of applications we've been receiving in the last few months. Morgan, would you like to call the order?
Yes. David Griffin.
Here.
Ruth Cox. James Woods.
Here.
Carrie McNair. George Bray.
Here.
Jim Bisbee.
Here.
Joe Klotz.
Here.
And Christian Evans. Here. We do have a quorum tonight.
Very well. Are there any minutes for us to review this evening?
No, not this evening, but we have a minute taker. I think you met her at our last meeting, and she will be catching us up on all of our backlog minutes and our current ones.
Very well, thank you. Just an introduction to the start of hearings tonight. For those of you who may not be familiar, Historic Preservation Commission, or HPC, is a public commission appointed by the City of New Bern's Board of Aldermen. It's responsible for preserving and safeguarding New Bern's locally designated historic districts, both downtown and Riverside, and is based on the U.S. Department of Interior standards, state statutes, city ordinances, and New Bern's historic guidelines. Two of the major tasks of the HPC include approving applications for a Certificate of Appropriateness, what we call a COA, and preventing demolition of historic structures due to neglect. The HPC holds a quasi-judicial hearing on an application for a COA. The Commission hears sworn testimony and evidence presented by the applicants, by parties who receive notice of the hearing, and by others who can justify that they have relevant evidence and are directly affected by the application. The Commission cannot consider comments based on personal likes or dislikes, hearsay, or personal opinion that cannot be directly related to specific historic guidelines. Likewise, commissioners shall refrain from stating personal opinion, personal likes or dislikes, or hearsay during the hearing. The Commission's decision on application is based solely on testimony and evidence presented at a hearing that directly relates to the historic guidelines. Morgan, would you like to swear in anyone who would be presenting tonight?
All right. If you are going to be presenting any of the applications tonight, please come forward. Just all together.
That's anyone who's presenting an application or plans to speak in any capacity.
All right. That's all. Okay, hands up. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this evening is true to the best of your knowledge? Perfect. You're right.
Morgan, I think you have one more.
Oh, do I have one more? I'm sorry.
I'm going to need to speak as well.
I'm here, Drew. Drew. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this evening is true to the best of your knowledge?
All right, very well. Before we get started, just a summary of the hearing process. When an application comes up for review, the HPC administrator will provide an overview of the application. It will be displayed on the screens. The applicant or representative of the applicant will present the application. Proponents and opponents who receive notice of the hearing may present evidence, and rebuttal is allowed by the applicant if that's the case. Others who can justify that they have relevant information will be directly affected also may present evidence. Then the HPC administrator will present staff findings and recommendations to the commission. Applicant will have a final opportunity to speak. Commissioners will discuss the evidence, may ask for clarification, may have questions. Eventually, we will call for a motion to approve or deny the application with stated findings of fact. Motion will be discussed by the commission and the chairman will call for a vote. A COA can be approved with conditions, or outright denied. And with that, we can start our hearings.
Really quick programming note, Chairman. Would anybody have an issue if we were to strike item G from the agenda and move items E and F to the top of the agenda to allow for a scheduling conflict for a staff member?
No objection here.
It's fine.
Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve that agenda change?
So move.
Second.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. All right. So first up this evening is going to be 505 Metcalf Street. This is a request by the City of New Bern to remove a street tree in the primary AVC, and Foster Hughes is here this evening. And while he's talking, I'm going to pull up the application and show you the photos.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are requesting the removal of a water oak at 505 Metcalf. The tree has acorn issues due to surface roots recently being cut when water sewer lines were cut as part of a water sewer upgrade project on Metcalf Street. The tree has been poorly pruned in the past due to overhead line issues, and the gas line currently runs through the root ball. In accordance with City Ordinance 78.7, as the Parks and Recreation Director, I have deemed this a hazard. In your packet, you will also find information from Parks and Recreation staff who have evaluated the tree, and you will also find a report from the arborist. And I will read that arborist report to you. We contracted with arborist Seth Ward, and according to him, we have looked at the water oak located at 505 Metcalf Street. The tree overall looks to be in decent shape but needs to be removed. This tree is forked due to repetitive pruning from the overhead power lines and recently had severe root damage due to infrastructure construction. Overall, the tree needs to be removed and replaced with a lower growing native tree. And we are proposing to replace that with a Main Street maple tree. And our urgency in having this removed is they're just about finished up with the water sewer project, and so the plans for the water department is to go back and repave this street. And if we wait to take this tree and another tree that we'll be presenting later, that will hold the contractor back for a considerable amount of time to be able to perform their job. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and there may be some folks here that may want to speak for or against this request.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, are there any conflict of interest issues with this application? Any concerns about the application's completeness? All right, very well. Is there anyone who has received notice of this application that would like to speak either for or against it? Please approach.
My wife and I live at 505 Metcalf Street, so would like to speak in favor of it. The tree's been problematic for quite a while now, and most of its roots are gone as well. I do think it's a hazard pretty much for anyone in the street or on the sidewalk. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Dan Jones. I live at 507 Metcalf. I've lived there for approximately almost 35 years now. And I'm speaking in support of removal of the tree. Over that 35 years, I've watched the continual pruning and basically ruining of the tree. It is no longer pretty, and it is dangerous. So I'm in support. My wife and I both are in support of removal.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, very well. As far as the applicant goes, is there any rebuttal or anything else you'd like to add based on the comments heard?
No, sir.
Okay. Morgan, would you like to present staff findings and recommendations for this application?
Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Landscaping 241, Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are the proposed project is located within the primary ABC. The tree has been evaluated by a knowledgeable expert. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. I'd like to also add that the replacement tree is within the recommended tree list in the city code. Staff recommends the commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
All right, very well. If there's nothing further from the applicant, commissioners, any questions, comments, discussion?
I'd like to refer back to the resident who lives at 507, because I think they brought up a very, very important point, and that is that they've been residents in that location for 35 years, and across that entire time they have watched the city neglect the tree and inappropriately prune the tree. And to my view, the reason this tree is coming down is because the city has failed to be a steward of the tree as they are charged with under the guidelines. And they are doing it in many locations, but we can focus on just this one. And I'd like to know what the city intends to do to change their behavior. Otherwise, we will see these trees coming down all over the city and will wind up looking like suburbia. And that's not what we're supposed to. And I would like to refer to the guidelines where it says, landscape elements play an important role in defining the cultural environment of New Bern's historic districts. Mature trees, hedgerows, foundation plantings of New Bern's historic districts, gardens, grassy lawns, etc., contribute to the character of the streetscapes and structures. I don't know what the city's doing. They hire companies that cut off the roots without warning them, without helping them do it properly. I've been in many cities where mature trees survive water mains being replaced and streets being repaved, and that doesn't happen in this city. All the trees become a hazard, and I find that very disturbing. So I would like the city to come up with a plan of how it intends to protect the trees in the future, because I think this is a travesty. I don't disagree with the need for this tree to be removed, but I do believe that the reason it's being removed is because the city has not lived up to its responsibility.
As the Parks and Recreation Director, I do not disagree with any of the statements you've made. I've been here for a little over a year, and I cannot speak to how the city has gone about pruning trees in the past. In this previous year, I've worked with the Appearance Commission to work on making our pruning process better. And I'll give you a great example. In the past month, we have pruned 300 trees in the downtown area. So we are trying to start being proactive with trees. We do have a lot of old growth trees on streets like Metcalf and other areas in the historic district that have been neglected over the years, and we do have to work on that. There is a cost that comes with that as well, so we do have to rely on the Public Works Department to help us with that. The Appearance Commission is also in the process of doing street tree surveys in all areas of the city. So it is going to be a timely process, but what I can say is we are trying to work to be more proactive than I believe the city has in quite a while.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions for the applicant? Other concerns? Well, if there's nothing further, would anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. I move that we find the application for 505 Metcalf Street not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-411 to 15-429 in New Bern's Historic District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. The proposed project is located within the primary AVC. The tree has been evaluated by a knowledgeable expert. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. I'm sorry, applicable guidelines, paragraph 2.4.1.
Second.
Very well, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Would anyone care to make a motion to issue the COA?
So moved.
Second.
Have the motion and the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. You have your COA.
Thank you.
And you're here for another one, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Are we ready to proceed with the second one?
We are. Apologies, I don't have my hard copy tonight, so I'm doing this all digitally. So this is another request to remove a street tree at 508 Metcalf. And I'm going to put pictures.
Okay, the street tree in question at 508 Metcalf is a pecan hickory tree. The request was brought to the Appearance Commission. It has probably been brought in, we've got several folks that are representing that tree as well. It probably came to the Appearance Commission many months ago. The Appearance Commission took it up before the hurricane. They did not do anything about it. After the hurricane, they met. At first, they decided not to remove the tree. Then, after concerns from the residents came up, we agreed to have an arborist come in and do a further evaluation and do sound testing on the tree. And so, based on the recommendations of the arborist, after the hurricane, the tree had some considerable shifting of the trunk. There are also a lot of issues with the sidewalk, so that's creating an issue. But the residents are all in favor, I believe, and they will make their comments of having this tree removed. So the Appearance Commission did deem this to be a tree hazard, and so we are requesting this tree be removed. If this is approved, we will replace this with a Main Street maple tree. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I'm sure that some of the residents will be happy to make comments as well.
All right, very well. Commissioners, any interest or conflicts of interest on this application or concerns about completeness? Very well. Is there anyone who would like to speak, anyone who has received notice who would like to speak either for or against this application?
My name is Harry Gormley. I live right across the street from this tree at 509 Metcalf, and that tree will reach my front of my house, so I'm very much concerned about it. And so I would certainly agree in taking it down. And I would echo Joe's comments about being proactive, and I would volunteer to be part of that survey too. Thank you.
Thank you.
This already.
My name is John Jacobson. I live at 508 Metcalf Street. This is the sidewalk in front of my house. Before Hurricane Florence, that sidewalk was lifted approximately an inch. After Hurricane Florence, it was lifted approximately 2 inches. If you look in the left front side, you'll see there's been an additional lift there, as well as if you look at the entrance to my house, you will see there's been an additional lift at that side. So there's definitely been a movement of that tree in terms of its lean towards my neighbors. In addition, as the crew came through to do the sewer and water work, essentially they cut a good deal of the root system on the other side. So the net result is the city plans to cut some of the roots on this side in order to put a sidewalk back in. It's already cut some of the roots on the other side and destabilized that tree. So I would say there should be no question, it should be removed.
Thank you, sir.
John, what was your address one more time? I'm sorry. John, what was your address? 508. Thank you.
My name is Dan Jones. I'm at 507 Metcalf. Again, the same things I said about the other tree with regards to viability, watching it being destroyed over the course of 35 years. Sad to say I support removal of the tree. I don't like to see any tree go, but this one is no longer viable for the reasons stated, so I support removal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Anything further you'd like to add in light of the comments or anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, very well. Morgan, would you like to present staff findings and recommendations for the application?
Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Landscaping 241, statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is located within the primary AVC. The tree has been evaluated by a knowledgeable expert. Assorted maple species are listed in the listed recommended trees and shrubs that's found in section E8 of the land use ordinance. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends the commission approve the request for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Very well, thank you. Unless there's anything further from the applicant, commissioners, questions, discussion?
Just one question along similar lines. What's been done to discuss things with the company that's hired to put in sewer lines, et cetera, that they don't just come down the street and dig everything up, because you're going to put in a maple. And in about 5 years, that maple's going to have roots in the street. So if that street has to be repaved, or you have to put in new water lines or sewer lines, you're going to hire the same company who's going to do the same thing.
We are having internal discussions with the city management team regarding this issue now. So the goal is to prevent this from happening moving forward, even though there are times where it may be unavoidable due to the specific location of where existing meters are and where existing old growth trees are. So we will try to be as sensitive as we possibly can with this issue moving forward.
Thank you.
Commissioners, anything further? If not, would anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we find an application for a certificate of appropriation for 508 Metcalf Street to be not in congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance sections 15-411 to 15-429 and New Bern's Historical District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and finding of fact. Applicable guidelines, landscaping 2.4.1, finding of facts that the proposed project is located within the primary AVC. 2, that the tree has been evaluated by a knowledgeable expert. 3, assorted maple species are listed in a list of recommended trees and shrubs found in section E8 of the land usage ordinance. And 4, that the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Very well. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, very well. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Would anyone care to make a motion to issue the COA?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well. Motion passes. COA is issued.
Thank you, Pastor. All right.
So next one, going back to the top of the list,
Yes.
508 Johnson.
508 Johnson Street. This is a request to install a shingled roof in the place of a metal roof. And I'm going to pull up the application really quickly.
Okay, sir, owner of 508 Johnson Street. At the last meeting, myself an up and down, and I have to clear that up. Also, I was requested to bring in a sample of what it will be installed. We are rethinking this now as far as the color. We're probably going to lean more towards charcoal now after seeing this closer and really looking at it, which is still, we believe God writes it in dark color in nature. Also, I was asked to take some pictures of our residents. I want to see the roof. I cannot get close up to the front, but I was able to. This is the back of the house. That's the back of the house. I'm able to get on the back roof, so I took that picture for y'all. And then here is a picture of the front of the house.
Very well. Would any of the commissioners have any issue with adding these photographs to the content of the application? Okay, very well. That will be considered part of it. Anything further you'd like to add? Anything more on the application that you need to present, Morgan?
No, sir. Pretty cut and dry.
Okay. Commissioners, are there any issues with either conflict of interest or completeness of the application? All right. Is there anyone here who has received notice that would like to speak either for or against the application? Very well. Morgan, would you like to provide staff findings and recommendations?
Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Contemporary materials, 556. Statements of reason based on information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is located with the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. The proposed project utilizes appropriate materials. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, cited the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you very much. Anything further before we deliberate? Okay. I will start by making a few statements on this, and let me just state that this doesn't have necessarily specifically to do with your application, but I did receive a call from Alderman Bengal this afternoon, and she wished to convey her concerns in general with the number of metal roofs that we're losing in the district. And she did state that she understands the optics of how that looks. Being the owner of a sheet metal roofing company in New Bern. However, what she said she wouldn't be able to attend tonight and make these comments herself, but she asked me to at least have the discussion and bring up the points she made. And this is for us to consider as well as public consumption. She feels like the discussion we had essentially was relating to how many metal roofs we are losing. I let her know that we have seen a few more applications like this recently, but I felt as though it was mostly related to storm damage where people are reevaluating how they're going to fix their roofs, whether they're going to fix them, whether they're going to replace them. So there's simply more instances of this issue coming to light from more people. But that we do see this from time to time, even when we haven't had a storm. I told her that for as long as I've been on the HPC, regardless of the specific language in our guidelines, which has changed as we've done rewrites over the years, it's always held that anyone who would like to replace an existing metal roof with an asphalt or fiberglass shingle roof, or synthetic slate roof for that matter, that's acceptable in our guidelines. And in fact, we do have a guideline that determines that, and I'll read it here, and we discussed it as I was on the phone with her today. It is guideline 5.5.6, which is under contemporary materials, and it says, quote, Contemporary materials such as synthetic slate and fiberglass or asphalt shingles are acceptable for sloped roofing regardless of building age. Select fiberglass asphalt shingles from a darker color palette. The rest of the guideline goes on to talk about membrane and roll roofing for low slope roofs, but that doesn't apply to this application. So the implication of that guideline is that regardless of other guidelines which might point to retention of existing historic fabric, the way we've always interpreted this is that this particular guideline and previous guidelines that were written similarly trumps all those other ones, simply because it says that no matter what's there now, and it doesn't talk about metal roofing in particular, it says that synthetic slate and fiberglass or asphalt shingles are acceptable for sloped roofing regardless of building age. So it's a very broad statement. It's not a directive about any specific material you might be replacing, but essentially what we've always interpreted is that those materials are okay on any contributing structure, regardless of the age of it, and by extension, regardless of what's on it right now. This is something we can talk about further. I'm going to suggest we maybe bring this up in an upcoming design review, just to talk about interpretations and how it's been done before. Look at all the guidelines in question, because we do have those guidelines that state that retention of historic fabric is definitely to be considered. Those guidelines point to the Secretary of the Interior standards, and from there you have to determine whether you're talking about one of those four categories, which is preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, or reconstruction, and they all have a different standard. But my conversation with her ended by essentially saying that it all comes down for us to guideline 556, which trumps all of it, if that's what an applicant wants to do. So I promised I would bring this up for discussion and make her concerns known so that we, would be able to consider that in her absence. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So, Commissioners, are there any other questions or concerns? Any discussion?
Is the damage confined to the area where the tarp is? That's the only area that was damaged?
Yes, this is. No, there is other damage.
There is other?
There is other damage in the road. There's holes, and they got these popping up all the time now. We just had more stuff, area we had repaired. Now I have to have it repaired again.
Replacement use of the shingle, is that on the dormers and on the entry area?
No, that entry area is going to stay there.
Okay.
That's copper.
Okay.
We did not know it until we
just figured
got
I'd
there
ask.
and touched it and saw it, and that's going to be copper again. You're going to see that thing shine one of these days.
Any other questions, concerns? All right. If not, would anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 508 Johnson Street to be in non-congruence with New Bern Code of Ordinance Section 15-411 to 15-429 and New Bern's Historical District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and finding of facts. Contemporary materials, 5.5.6. Findings of fact, the proposed project is located within the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. The proposed project utilizes appropriate materials. 3, the proposed project is in non-congruence with the guidelines.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We do. Any discussion on the motion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well, it passes. Would anyone care to make a motion to issue the COA?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well, the motion passes. You have your COA.
Can I still say something?
Certainly.
We wanted a metal roof, and I had already been working on the house. He stood up my curb and said $35,000. And walked away. Then he was nice enough to email me a quote. That didn't include replacing the facing. That was a plus. Nothing more to say about that. I was going to end up with $50,000 worth of rope. There are other metals out there. But you have, Bingo puts in roll metal, which I understand which you all want installed. There are other types. I'd ask you, when it comes time to talk about this, like you had mentioned when you talk about metal roof, please investigate the other metals that can go on a roof that's still completely presentable. My neighbor has a roof with a cap on it. Looks completely presentable. It's still keeping the nature that you want. It just isn't a roll metal. And anybody that knows about roofing knows there should be a vent cap at the top. Roll metal, you don't have a vent cap. Heat stays inside, everything stays inside. Moisture stays inside. The metal rusts from underneath, which is the case with mine. Underneath that metal is nothing but rust, because there's no way for the air to penetrate. So I would ask, when you do actually have this discussion, please look at other options and give the homeowners options to put on their roofs besides roll metal.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay. Just a second, guys. Technical difficulty, excuse me. Okay. So up next is 528 East Front Street. This is a request to demolish a masonry wall, columns, and a chain link fence in the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. This is an amendment to an existing COA, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who knows what she's doing.
You all have seen this application before when we asked for the demolition of an existing garage located at the rear of 528 East Front Street. And what we're requesting as they're going to take down this very large concrete masonry and brick masonry building, the owner wants to also take down the brick wall along East Front Street that includes chain link metal. It does include a little garden area and some pillars and paving. And as we discussed in the meeting, looking at the two bricks next to each other, the newer brick being a wire cut brick and the existing brick on the East Front Street historic house, obviously not being a wire cut brick. And this is the little garden area that would also be demolished to make room for a detached guest cottage and garage we will bring back as part of another project. And right after the last meeting, Morgan wrote John Wood, and I can put it up here, but she has the email.
I have the email, but he said, yes, without a doubt, it's the same age as that garage that was approximately 1950s, 1960s. And I can pull up the email if you guys would like to see it. But he said it dates the exact same. I've got it. Oh, we got it. Yep,
Short and sweet.
short and sweet. He said approximately the late 1950s to the 60s. But it's not contributing, the garage was not contributing, and these are not contributing garden walls.
Very well. Thank you for getting that letter. All right. Commissioners, any conflicts of interest or concerns over application completeness?
Just one thing, Mr. Chair, that the email from John would be attached with this, if we approve this, would it be attached with the whole entire package?
Yeah, I'll put it in the folder along with as evidence for the future.
Just for future reference, so.
Very well. Okay, is there anyone who has received notice that would like to speak either for or against the application? Very well. Morgan, would you like to provide our staff findings and recommendations on the application?
Absolutely. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Demolition 641. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is located within secondary and tertiary AVCs. The masonry wall was constructed approximately in the 1960s according to the State Historic Preservation Office, and it's also not contributing. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines, and staff recommends the commission approve the application for demolition at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you. Anything further you'd like to add? Very well. Commissioners, questions, comments, discussion?
Was there a replacement?
We have not started designing the new projects, but they will be in the vicinity where the old garage and, the old garage is here, the old garden area is here, and that brick wall along there. So all in this area, we're going to place a new cottage and a new garage as separate buildings with landscaping and walls as part of that. So there will be some masonry wall along Johnson Street. Not sure what it's going to look like just yet. Long answer to yes.
That guideline's pretty specific. The demolition of a non-contributing structure shall not be denied by the HPC, so.
Correct. So, probably not a lot to talk about here. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. I move that we find the proposed amendment to a Certificate of Appropriateness of 528 East Front Street not incongruous with the New Bern's Code of Ordinance, Section 15411 through 15429, and New Bern's Historic District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Demolition 6.4.1, but I'd also like to put in 2.5.4, which says that chain link fencing is not appropriate in the historic district, so that would have to go regardless. Findings of fact that the non-contributing structure, that the application requesting demolition is an application that cannot be denied, and it's in accord with our guidelines.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Very well. Any further discussion on the motion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well. Motion passes. And since this is an amendment, COA is already issued.
Thanks,
Thank you.
All right. So next up, we have 413 George Street. This is a request to install 6/6 wooden windows. They are doing a wooden door with a single glass light, no longer a steel door. A wooden vent louver in the primary AVC. 1/1 double hung windows. These are existing currently. This is not a part of the application, so strike that, excuse me. Installation of a wooden fence in the secondary AVC and handrails in the primary AVC that were damaged, and they are going to go back with a different design. And I believe that covers everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta swear you guys, I'm sorry?
Including the additions.
Including additions, okay. And I gotta swear you guys in real quick. How it is. You know the drill. All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you two are about to give this evening is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay, great. Floor's yours.
Do you have the pictures and stuff that she said?
I've got them all on my jump drive.
Okay.
Would you like the chute goes up there first?
Yeah, probably easier to just kind of walk through things.
All right, guys. Here we have, I'm just gonna jump straight to pictures because the pictures say more than anything else. So, I'm gonna just scroll along and let you guys talk about it.
So that picture there is actually an illustration of the door on our current house. So we kind of use that as a model of the type of door, hollow door. Although we have not picked it out, it's a close representation of the kind of door. And I think, did you have other doors on here as well?
There were two lots. There were many. Okay. Here we go. There were multiple pictures of doors just like this in New Bern that were sent. That was one. There were several iterations of other doors just like this in town that she sent me. She probably sent me about a good,
Yeah, and that's another example. That door is actually at 612 New Street, which is also a wooden door with glass pane. But as I said, it will be kind of that's a representation. It's not the actual door that we'll be putting up, but it'll be something that's like that in nature.
I didn't include every single one because space, but yes, they sent multiple pictures and examples. And this is the proposed,
Louvers.
yes, that's gonna be.
So currently, what's up there now, it looks like they took two pieces of maybe 1/4 inch or 7/16 plywood to cover the vents that go on the end of the house, which faces the street. And so we need some ventilation up there, one, and two, I wanted to make it look aesthetically pleasing. So this is a representation of the vent that's next door to us, and it's very similar to what we have in our house as well. It's on there as well.
Mhm.
Do I just push this button?
Maybe. What were we looking for, guys?
The-
Picture of our house,
yeah.
the yellow. Okay. And this is another door, sorry, it got.
So essentially, that's what we want to do, is we want to put a vent that's on the house that's aesthetically pleasing and also serves the purpose of venting the attic and so forth. And it more than likely will be something that's fabricated, much like we did with ours, taking, different kinds of wood and fabricating the actual piece that'll fit the opening that's up there now. I'm not sure if the opening that's there now was the one from before or it's been modified, but that's what we'll do, is take those pieces of plywood out and then put the vent back over top of that.
And those are very common in the historic district, and those we wouldn't leave her in that. No concern.
And it just so happens that the house is done in aluminum, so we'll have to, figure out how we can fabricate it and then fit it in so that it'll match up with the aluminum siding that's on there, because we don't have aluminum to replace it with.
And these are the pictures that she sent me, the first go round of the interior, so I'm just, So I'm just gonna let you take this and just bump down and you can just illustrate as you go.
So, I'm not sure which window this is, but a lot of the windows that we had as a result of Hurricane Florence and losing part of the metal roof, and I'm here to say that our metal roof is going to stay, we're not going to take it off, we're just going to have it repaired. We had a lot of water entry through the metal roof, and then we had a lot of water entry through the windows that were there because each of the panes blew out or they broke. And so we got a lot of water damage, which filtrated through the walls, and we had a lot of issues with mold and rot and all kinds of things going on. So that's just kind of a representation, I think.
Just to elaborate on that, we didn't know the severity of the damage of a lot of these windows until we had to tear out the drywall because of the mold and everything. And after we had to tear out the windows, not just the sills, but underneath the windows, the sills themselves, everything was just, if not eaten up by termites, it was eaten up by just severe water damage over the years and just complete rot.
So the ones prior to this picture were all 6x6s. There are two sets of these kinds of windows, one in, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, one in contributing and one set that were in non-contributing, that were already there in place, and they're wood windows, they just don't have the buttons or the grids in them. They've probably been in there, if I had to guess, maybe 10, 15 years, something like that. They're operable, they work good, they're not rotted out. They just need to have some, cleaned up and paint them up a little bit. And unfortunately in this house there were vinyl, metal, wood, and then the 6/6s. There were 4 different versions of windows that were in this house over the period of its whatever they did to it. So that's kind of that's a representation of the actual wood windows with buttons in them that are in there now. The new wood windows with the wood sashes and the framing and so on. That just kind of gives you an idea of some of the window conditions, the outside, and all the windows on the outsides, regardless of what they are, all the trim needs to be replaced, and then some of the casing at the bottom needs to be replaced on the outside because they've either been rotted out and they just don't work anymore. That's another example of some of the casing that was incomplete when they put it in there and didn't bud up to the aluminum siding very well. So this is a representation of some of the aluminum siding. The whole house is done in aluminum, white aluminum. It's 8-inch. There's no design to the aluminum. It's flat-faced. A lot of the corner pieces, in fact 25 of them, along with several pieces of the aluminum, and I suspect it was from kids playing, cars, things like that dented it, or they damaged the corner pieces. So we had to go out and buy aluminum sheeting and fabricate each single corner piece by hand. And so we're now replacing each one of the corner pieces and then adding to the aluminum on top with new aluminum so that it's not dented and full of holes and everything else. There are a lot of the aluminum siding that does have holes in it. What we're doing is just taking Bondo and filling the holes in with Bondo, sanding it over, and then eventually it'll all be repainted. That's another illustration of some of the damage to the siding. And it just so happens it's kind of nice from this standpoint. It was only on one side that we had a lot of damage to the aluminum siding in some of the upper structure, but the other 3 sides we didn't have much of a problem. We did at the front where they connected the railing system, which was I think 30 inches tall. When they connected it into the aluminum housing, they just pounded nails and cut it out with some kind of tin snips or something. So we're going to have to figure out how to make something decorative that will now look nice up against the aluminum siding, fit it all in, and put the new railing system in. This fencing is the fencing that faces the west side, which is the parking lot to the probation officer building, the Luck building. So it is 6 feet tall. So this is actually the back of the house behind the garage. It was a fence that was put up as a privacy to the parking lot and the activity in the parking lot. And there's kind of an illustration of the attaching to the aluminum siding that we now have to fix and
The front railing.
recondition it. And David was nice enough to bring us an illustration of what would be acceptable that we could use as kind of a design for the new railing. So hence that is probably what we're going to be doing, is using that same design. It's about 30 inches tall. There's not a lot of it that needs to go up, but what's there is unacceptable. It's an old 2x4 that's probably not treated. There's no design to it. It's falling apart. So we'll end up, would like to put up a new railing. Is that it for pictures?
There should be a lot more.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, this was, I attached for reference to the board, the old COA that went with this. This was May of 2017. Trick was here, so I think it was May of 2017 when we talked about the fence. So I attached that for your reference just to kind of tie everything together. Some of you were with us, some of you weren't.
So that's kind of hard to see. He originally, the previous owner had originally put up a 6-foot fence around the whole perimeter. And then on the left side of the building, as you're looking at the house from George Street, he brought it out past the front of the house, 6 feet tall, almost to the sidewalk, if I remember right. And so Morgan and I had a discussion about what we could do to correct and bring it back into compliance. So we took the majority of that fence on the left side of the house, looking at the front of the house, down to 4 feet. We left a 6-foot section, which is between my house and Christy's house next door, who runs a bed and breakfast. And we did that for the business that she has there with the bed and breakfast, or the Airbnb, I'm sorry. And she's got some Leland cypress and stuff, so it kind of offers a nice barrier there. But beyond that, everything's going to be changed to the 4-foot height. So, I don't have a pencil.
Hang on, Mark. I got a pen.
So that's a top-down view of the property with the house. The garage is right here is your garage. The front of the house would be up here. There's the fence that we brought back from the sidewalk and brought it back to be in compliance behind the house and 4 foot high to about right here. And then it is 6 foot high to right here. And then over here on this side, yeah.
There's no fence there.
And on this side, we want to make it 4 feet from the back of the house to where it connects into that back parking lot where the probation officer's 6-foot fence is. So that is the piece right now that is not installed. Just the posts are in the ground, but the boards that would go up there are not installed at this time. But everything else from here, back up through here, and along the back is installed.
Just mash that one and put back on.
Okay.
I'll flip through. So, yeah, these are all photos that I took when I visited the property back in about a year ago. They did correct the fence as it needed to be. Just to disclose, Chairman Griffith and I went to the site on Tuesday about 12:30, and I took some photographs just to show you all just the interior as it is currently, and did that with their permission, of course. It's a pretty neat house. It's had a lot of changes. And let's see. These are some. Those are the jalousies. The windows that are in the kitchen, they're not functional any longer. You can see where the mechanism's even been broken.
So that window is probably 5 feet by 3.5 feet, and it's the old aluminum cranked out jalousie type window, but the crank's missing.
But it's on the tertiary AVC.
Right. And that was there. So, and it's very, very old indeed. Moving forward, these were the windows that were installed at some point. This is in the secondary AVC, the house that you're looking at with the landing up there. That's Christy's house. She's right there. So that's when you're looking out. Those are, what material are those windows?
Those are vinyl.
Those are vinyl. Okay.
Those are done well for us, and we're not replacing them.
This is the rear door. Let's move that along a little
So
bit.
you can kind of get a perspective of that picture with the purple drywall. Not sure why they use purple drywall, but the top of the door is almost to the top of the ceiling. So it's probably about 6'5", 6'6", maybe something like that, for that back room that they put in there.
And I believe that when we were there, by looking at the the sandboard maps, that section of the house, that immediate section, is not contributing.
Yeah, if you have those, whenever we get to it,
Right.
we can look at those.
The house has got about 3 different portions of original, another, and then another. It's a collection. But moving forward, this was just another one of the windows that was installed. This is looking to the other side. This is on the right-hand side of the house, secondary AVC again.
That was the That was the master bedroom,
Okay.
one without the grids in it.
And more photos of the windows. Now, this is the ones that would be looking in the primary AVC, kind of like the living room area. Per
That
se.
is the, facing George Street.
Okay.
But it doesn't have the grids on it because they're
Right.
currently being painted.
Gotcha. This was in what section?
I think that's upstairs in one of the back bedrooms.
Okay, and that's a wood window?
So that's the same exact window as the one that's in the front, just without the grids.
Gotcha, okay.
So all of the upstairs bedrooms, although be it some of them were non-contributing, were all replaced with wood windows with the grids. Because they too fell out and the panes came out and it rained in them and everything else. Yeah.
And disregard this photo because they're not doing the steel and glass
Right.
door any longer, they're doing a wooden and glass door, so disregard that, please. That's the handrails that were busted, and they're gonna be replaced.
That is a step from the kitchen that steps down into one of the non-contributing additions that they added on. We had, because the flooring was about 4 to 5 inches out of level, so we had to go in and re-level, and now we just got to make that a step.
You can see some of the original timbers. And that is the, if you look closely, that's the original
see the
siding.
siding.
That's the original siding of the house, if you look at the mouse right there.
So that original siding is underneath drywall, which is now the inside of the house. So if you peel the drywall off, you're inside the house, you peel the drywall off, you'd have the outside siding facing you.
Yep. And this was.
That is up in the ceiling, up in the one of the bathrooms where we,
It needs to be rotated.
where we exposed some of the beams, taking the drywall off, that shows where the non-contributing and contributing structure came together, and the roof, when they built over it, they left the metal roof still intact, so you could still see
That's right.
the metal roofing structure.
That's just a picture of the siding. And more.
Same thing.
Yeah, you can see the tin that's there.
And Dave, one had the one roof had the solid boards, the other one had it had the shake, like the shake version on there. So you have the shakes to the left and then the solid pieces to the right. And you can see the metal roof in that picture there.
Yep, that's right. Right there. So we're almost done with all the pictures. Now, this is on the left-hand side of the house. Oh, secondary, and it's the one that faces 411 George.
Yes, that's correct.
And that material is.
That's fine.
Okay. That's just a close-up of it, and that's the same windows, the ones
That's the
that.
jalousie metal aluminum crank out.
Tertiary, yeah. So that's the end of everything that you guys have, and that's the end of the pictures that I took that particular day.
Okay. Do you want to, just while you're still standing there, just go ahead and pull up the Sanborn maps, and we can just.
Gotcha. All right, this is the Sanborn maps. All right, I'm going to zoom in, guys, because it's pretty tiny. So this is 19, David, do you want to just go ahead and explain from here since you did?
Sure. The listing we have actually indicated 1925 as the date on the house. And so the first Sanborn map I went to find it was the next map we have after 1925, which is 1931. And this is the latest Sanborn map that I have access to also. But there is the house. And it's made of 2 pieces at that point. There's a squarish front piece with a front porch that's dashed in, and then there's a rectangular piece off the back with a side porch dashed in. And there are essentially 4 pieces to the house right now, two more pieces have been added to, as it sits in the plan there, the upper left side of the house.
Right.
And just for kicks, I went back to the 1924 Sanborn map, not expecting to find it, because our information said 1925, but there it is in 1924. And so I went back another map to, what's the next one?
1908.
1913.
13. And there it is. And one more back to 1908, and it is there also. So it's a little older than 1925. We do have maps that go back further. The next one is 1904, and I didn't find that area of the city mapped, because they always start, right there at Union Point and work out. So I don't think we have any further evidence beyond, earlier than 1908. But that does, for us, I believe, establish. You heard the applicant speaking about the contributing and non-contributing parts, and that's because as we, went through this and went out there Tuesday of this week, and we can discuss this amongst ourselves, but it seemed to me that obviously there were two pieces that were as original as 1908. The other two pieces that are added that have the vinyl windows and much more contemporary things, I think clearly we can consider those to be the non-contributing pieces. And in fact, not very much work is proposed in those at all. Most of it is occurring within those first two that we see as early as 1908.
But it is interesting that when we first started, when we first came to the design meeting, the historical, what is that document? The historical.
The National Register?
Yes.
The National Register.
National Register described the house as, correct me if I'm wrong, how do they say it?
Three bays.
Three by two, yeah.
3 bays by 2 bays, which would not include that back part at all of the house. It would only be the rectangular front part of the house. So my interpretation of that, and I thought that's what we had talked about when we were here at the design review, was the original house was just the 3 by 2. And then at some time they added that back piece that shows up on those other maps, and then the other 2 pieces after that. So that picture of the roof line that we showed, that you can actually see the metal roof once we exposed the ceiling, that was an addition which included that second portion of the house.
So I think the point is that he's right that going back to the Sanborn maps shows something completely different. But I'm not sure why there's that difference between what the actual, and I don't know if it's really a survey, but the house description describing that as a 3. I'm not sure how that happens, where there's a disparity between what's called out and what actually happens.
Well, that description
But I understand the Sanborn maps do.
was written at the time that the district was established, and whoever, I don't know, we don't know who did those. Someone may know. Whoever was writing those descriptions was standing outside the house, and they wrote 3 bays by 2 bays, referring to that first piece, but clearly did not do that in conjunction with the Sanborn mapping as we have it. I think the clear conclusion is that those two, even if this thing could be from 1895 and the back piece from 1898, and we wouldn't know it from a 1908 map. However, the point is that they both are from the same time period. Not 1940, not 1960. The other ones definitely are much more contemporary. So that's what leads me to the conclusion that those two pieces are what we should consider contributing. And in fact, that's where most of the work happens. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to present?
Yes, sir.
on this? All right, very well. Is there anyone who has received notice on this application that would like to speak either for or against it? Yes.
I received notice, and the only thing that separates this house to my house is a driveway. And I have seen nothing but neglect out of this house up until Mark and Jill have purchased this home. And the love that they're pouring into this house is tremendous. And, you know, I've put a lot of money and time and effort and love in my house, and it's just going to make George Street sing. And I just wanted to share that information.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Okay. Morgan, would you like to provide staff findings and recommendations?
Actually, if we could maybe have a little bit more discussion and come back to me in about 5 or 10 minutes, because I think I need to just adjust my recommendations as they were presented, if that's okay with you.
All right.
No, that's different.
Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and make several comments. We're going to try and sum this up because it's an awful lot. We've seen an awful lot in pictures and description. The new front door is part of the application. Previously at design review we saw a steel door, half glass, and that is no longer the case. It's going to be a wood door, half glass, paneled. Are there any of those photographs in there that represent exactly what you're planning to get?
For the door?
Yes.
No, sir, not exactly.
And that's what kind of puts us in a little bit of a pickle, because we have to have something that's definitely in the application in order to vote on it. I mean, it's possible we could approve it with the actual door coming to Morgan before you actually buy it, so that there's no risk on your part.
Sure.
We could consider it that way if there's nothing in the application that you want to point to and say this is it.
Sure, I understand.
If we're comfortable with that, we can talk about that further. Okay, staying on the front elevation, up at the attic level, installing a new wood louver. And right now, like you said, there's just plywood over the old vent opening.
Correct.
There was a photograph in the application of the neighbor's attic louver, and you plan to replicate that just in the size you need for that opening.
Correct.
Okay. Then there's the wood windows. The photographs we've seen, and as you explained when we were out there on Tuesday, photographs we've seen show 1:1. However, we know there will be 6x6. It's just the grids are not there right now.
Okay, that is correct also.
Because the whole thing is in process. This is an after-the-fact application.
One thing I did forget to bring up, and not to change your train of thought, is the roof repair.
Okay.
Forgot about that.
All right. Make a note. So there are new double-hung wood windows proposed. Many are installed, if not all. They will be 6/6, and we did see some photographs of them in what was presented. Porch handrails, you submitted the detail sketch.
Mm-hmm.
And full disclosure, I gave them that sketch. That's a detail that I drew for a house renovation on Hancock Street for Richard Hoff. And at our design review, we were wondering exactly how to put the handrails together, because, like you said, what's there is a couple of 2x just nailed together, and
Yep.
We had the whole replacement in kind discussion that 2x nailed together wouldn't be okay. We needed something more appropriate, so that's now in the application. Now let's see, the fencing. We had the previous application in there. It showed all of the ways in which it previously was not in compliance. All of that has been fixed, and there is, what's part of this application is just extending a portion in the rear that you are proposing at 4 feet. It's actually in a location on the property where it could be 6 feet, but they're proposing 4 feet. Certainly that's fully allowable.
And the property that resides right next to that is the county's property, which is part of the probation officer parking lot.
Okay, we talked about the aluminum siding repair. And yeah, full disclosure again, that we did exchange letters months and months ago, like maybe last spring or something like that timeline, about siding repair. They're not interested in pulling the aluminum siding off, and so just repairing a few pieces and replicating a few pieces where they actually need to replace them. We discussed that as being perfectly appropriate. The jalousie window that we saw is actually installed in one of the pieces we would be considering contributing. It's on the tertiary elevation right now. It's not proposed for replacement. It exists, and there's no requirement that they do anything with it. If in the future they decide to replace it, then they will, have to come back and propose something appropriate. But right now, the jalousie window really doesn't play a role. And as you mentioned, the roof repair, I believe at design review you said there were maybe 2 of the roofing pans.
Two panels came off from the peak all the way down to the fascia. They blew off, and we're hoping that they're going to be okay enough that we can put them back up and pinch all the seams. And we're already starting to reseal the roof now.
So that is just repair in kind of what's already there. And the only thing I'll add is that this doesn't appear in the application, but the 2 windows that are sliders in the kitchen, which are part of the contributing structure, those are inappropriate in the way that they're installed. In fact, as I looked at them, they even looked like they were double hungs installed sideways. Although I look closer at the pictures, they may be manufactured sliding windows, but they are in a contributing part of the house. And whether they were there or not, as we just got clarification from the city attorney today, something that's in violation is in violation. So what I need to ask you is, are you prepared to roll in replacement of those 2 windows into this application for consideration today?
Probably not at this time.
Okay. Well, the clarification we got today from the attorney on how to approach this, which we often ask if there's any question, is that will be seen as a violation, which, then you'll end up getting a letter and have to come back. So that's why I'm wondering if, you'd like to just amend the application with a different proposal for those right now and roll it into this COA.
Well, the thing is, I wouldn't know what we're going to put in there if that's the case, because I have no idea the dimensions and what that's going to take, at least right now.
Well, given the proportion of the overall opening, it would take probably 2 or 3 double hung windows in order to get a correct proportion for those. I don't know exactly what the width is either.
Right.
Morgan, we could pull up that photo again and maybe get a better idea.
Probably about 5 feet, 4 feet maybe, 4.5 feet.
Yeah, go ahead and pull it up.
Can we just hold on this until the design review? This comes back and get that in the windows?
That would require putting a hold on the entire application, you mean? To go through another design review?
Because of that lens.
Well, the way we talked about it today in terms of asking the attorney for clarification is that those windows are not included in the application, so we can act on the application without considering them. It's just that they would be considered a violation and we'd end up having to send them a letter and come back just to deal with those. So the idea is, if it's amenable, is to come up with something while we're here that they would agree to, that we would think is appropriate, roll it into this application and they won't have to come back.
Okay, for our purposes,
Right, but that's- this
if
is
they were
one of the other
going to amend the
We're
application,
talking about the slide, the one that goes side to
the
side.
dimensions aren't
Yeah,
critical.
that, we're talking about
The
the one
only
that
thing
goes
that's
side to
critical
side.
is that appropriate windows would be installed.
Right, and it's a matter of, based on it. The proportions are a little odd for double hungs because it occurs in a kitchen and they,
That's right.
the
There it is.
seals have to
Okay.
be above the counter.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a wider application, so that's why I said it'd probably take 2 or 3 double hungs in order to have an appropriate proportion for each window.
Yeah, but that could still be stated in very general terms and meet the letter of the guideline. And yes, the windows that exist now would be removed and replaced with appropriate, wood windows.
Right, and that can end up being a condition to approval of this COA. Of this COA.
Add that as a condition.
Right, but it is better to just approach it on the front end rather than hit them with a condition that they may not be prepared, to take care of.
That's
So-
what I was saying about holding off and trying to get the whole COA approved. That gives them time to look at the windows, see what they can put in there, and bring that back to us. I mean, I know they're, because I know where they are, and I don't know where they are. I know they've started on it, and they're here after the fact. But I think this is it's paramount that we get this right. One way or the other.
Well, yes, but like I said, as this is not part of the current application, so we can act on the application as it stands.
Right.
And deal with that as a separate item. My only thought was if there was something we could all agree on at this time, roll it into this COA.
Well, I'm with you on that. That's where my train of thought is too. Just try to get everything in this COA, but
and not hold them off for another month.
Right.
I do have the recommendations. Fences and garden walls, 252, 253, windows, doors, and openings, 431, 433, entrances, 441, 442, 444, accessibility and life safety, 471, statements of reason based on the information contained in the application in staff's judgment are the project is located within the primary and secondary AVCs, the proposed materials that they have presented to us in the application, i.e. not the vinyl windows, they were not presented. Those are appropriate. The proposed changes are not incongruous with the guidelines. However, the vinyl windows are incongruous, so staff recommends approval of the application citing the aforementioned guidelines. This is not a condition. This is just a side note that the vinyl windows are incongruous. As it was mentioned, it is a violation of the guidelines in the zoning ordinance. We don't know how they got there. I do have some photos from back when the former owner had it. However, it will need to be addressed within a reasonable amount of time. I think once they are at least trying to get into compliance, we have that grace period since they are trying to come into compliance with the guidelines, and we can work on that.
So, and that's another way to approach this is they can come back in a month or two
And amend it.
just to amend this COA.
That's
And we
correct.
act on it, we act on only what's in the application tonight,
Right.
holding that out.
That's correct. Once the COA, all the items in the COA, items 1 through 5 are listed, they have to come all together and all be approved together or denied together unless they choose to withdraw portions of it that they see aren't going anywhere.
Okay, now just to clarify also, when you refer to vinyl windows, we're talking about these sliders in the contributing portion, not the old vinyl windows that got installed, who knows when, in the non-contributing portions.
Correct.
Yeah, because they're not part of the application.
That's correct.
They're just acknowledged to exist.
They are just there, unfortunately.
Okay, well, that's a path forward then. Provided you're amenable to that, is coming back to amend the COA with some proposal for us to consider.
Does that also mean the door is the same situation?
The front door?
Yeah, until we pick one out.
you guys would approve it with her being able to.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, all the photographs, they're all fairly similar. It's a paneled half-glass wood door. I presume that we could all feel comfortable including that in the application, approving it with the final selection coming to Morgan,
You could make that a condition.
before you buy it.
Yeah, that's okay.
I feel that you guys already know what kind of type of door that needs to be there. So I'm
Right.
pretty sure that you're gonna get the correct one. I don't have a problem with that. I
It's
think,
just a matter of really design of what the glass is gonna look like. I don't know what that
Right.
is. And whether it's a maple or an alder or what kind of door, what is that for the door?
Now, I will make one other mention on that. The one that's installed there now that originally was part of the application.
Yep.
And we don't have a good photograph of this, so I'll describe it to the rest of the commission. It was and you really need an exterior photograph to see what I'm about to talk about. It's a pre-hung door from Lowe's or Home Depot, and it has the standard brick mold casing. Well, that entire thing has just been stuck into and nailed into the original door framing, which is not the appropriate way to do this. So I want to mention that so that when the new door comes back to Morgan, it is truly a door installed in the old framing and stocks,
Yes, it was.
rather than the pre-hung unit stuck in there and nailed in.
It's this one here.
So that would
to your-
need to be part of a condition, just to make note of that, I would think.
No, I'll get rid of this thing. It's just. Go ahead, I'll find it. It's not that one. It's the one that has the double glass, right?
Yes.
It's not that one. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties. This thing's being difficult. Trying to show you the exact door that they're proposing.
I want to know more about that.
Not that one. This-
So to your point, David, and I agree with you, that the molding around that steel door is very current and for a steel door. You're looking for something like this where it is more indicative of that time period with the wood trim around the door,
Well-
not that.
Yeah, that the door itself is what is replaced, not the trim. That the
Well-
door you buy, not be a pre-hung door.
Right, but we're gonna have to make that trim because the trim doesn't exist. It didn't exist before because they had a steel door in there. So-
Okay,
So it's all
understood.
gone.
Correct. Then
So that's
back
what
to
we
your
need
first
to do is
statement,
we're gonna
it'll have to be.
fabricate the 4-inch wide and take it up into the sky or the transom
Transom. Correct.
and blend it because it's not blended at all now.
Understood. Yes. Thank you.
So that's what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. Is there any other discussion or questions for the applicant?
Just FYI, this is our personal door, and you guys approved this 3 years ago.
Any other concerns? Okay, well, a good discussion. We've talked about a lot of issues. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 413 George Street to be not in congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-4111 through 15-429, and New Bern's Historical District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Fences and garden walls 2.5.2, 2.5.3, windows, doors, and openings 4.3.1, 4.3.3, entrances 4.4.1, 4.4.2, 4.4.4, accessibility and life safety 4.7.1. Findings of fact that the proposed projects is located within the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVC. And I would attach the following conditions: that the door that you guys build, or before you put it up there, that you let Morgan look at it.
Bring a picture in your
Right, absolutely, that it gets approved by the administrator. Did I cover everything?
Well, if not, someone can bring it up in discussion. Should we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well. The motion passes. Would someone care to make a motion to issue the COA?
So moved.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well. Motion passes. You have your COA.
All right, guys, last up tonight we have Miss Christy Decker Frazier. She's next door at 411 George Street. I do have to note it's an after-the-fact COA. This is a request to install another fiberglass shingle roof in place of a metal roof in the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. And she even brought in a sample of her old roof for you guys that I will pass along. And I'm just going to turn it over to her. And I've got all the pictures and everything.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Christy Decker Frazier. I live and own the property at 411 George Street. And, we don't have to talk about the storm. But I did leave for the storm and brought my two boys back. And the Exhibit A is this. That's our roof. That's what it looked like after the storm. I had significant water damage in the second floor from the attic. The attic itself, you can walk up into the attic. It's a full attic, walking attic. And while I came back, I was more concentrated on the property itself, so I kept looking down. I wasn't looking up. And about a week later, I went up into my boys' rooms, and it was significant damage on the ceiling. So I went up to the attic and found what was left behind with Florence. So anyway, I'm a mom, and providing a roof over a head or three heads is important, you know. So I did things. I usually come here and do everything appropriately, but the day that first, you got to get on the calendar. And so I was begging them to please get on the calendar because rain's coming. But I chose Appalachian Sky. It is an architectural shingle roof. I do have an interior design background with a degree in interior design, so I did consult with many people before I made a choice. So I did choose something very neutral and an upscale architectural shingle roof. That is the color on top of my roof now. I tried to stay within the same color palette that was there. This house was built in 1920 by a prominent first African-American doctor in town, and I've tried to maintain its you know what I'm trying to say. I can't think of the word, but I'm trying to preserve it. It's a beautiful home. 20% of the shingles underneath the wood itself was rotted, so that had to be replaced. And I moved forward, but ran to Morgan as soon as I realized I've missed a beat. So I'm begging for forgiveness in this particular case.
All right. Anything further you want to add? Okay, thank you. Commissioners, are there any conflicts of interest or concerns over application completeness? All right. Is there anyone who has received notice that would like to speak for or against the application?
My name is Mark Maxwell, and I'm 413 George, which is right next door. And I can attest to the conditions that she had to deal with through Hurricane Florence and afterwards, and actually watched the operation of taking the old metal roof off and then the damage to the underlying wood structures. And right now it really looks good, and I'm happy for her because I know for a long time she was dealing with leaks even before the hurricane, but when Florence came through, it kind of helped and accelerated a lot of what she had to deal with inside. So a lot of that may have been to the point of being inhabitable, but it really, really looks good, and the guys that did the job did an excellent job on the roof. So I don't think it deters from the aesthetics of the way New Bern presents itself. So I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you. Anyone else make any comments? All right. Do you have anything further to add? Morgan, would you like to give us staff findings and recommendations?
Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Contemporary materials, 556. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the staff's judgment are the proposed project is located within the primary, secondary, tertiary AVCs. The proposed materials are appropriate. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines, and staff recommends the commission approve the application. For major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
All right, thank you. Similar situation to an earlier application, same guideline applies. Essentially the way we've been interpreting this for a long time, and based on what it says, with good reason, that asphalt shingle replacement for metal roofing is perfectly allowable. Comments from Ms. Bengal apply to this application as well. Just say that. Any further discussion or questions for the applicant? Okay. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that we find this application for 411 George Street to be non-congruent with the New Bern's Code of Ordinance, section 15411 to 15429, and New Bern's historical district guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and finding of fact of contemporary materials 556. The states of finding of fact the proposed project is located within the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVC. The proposed materials are appropriate, and the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Second.
Very well. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Would someone care to make a motion to issue the COA?
So moved.
Second.
Have that motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You have your COA.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The houses on George Street probably were not part of the big fire. I'm researching that, but these houses were saved during the fire of the early 1920s.
Mhm.
Me too. You see.
Actually, I kind of am a keeper of the antiquities of New Bern, and I like to use this as a little example to show people of how they used to install metal roofs and how not to install metal roofs now. So if you don't mind, I would like to now do it. Add to the junk collection.
Well, and as you would know, anybody who's been to our office knows that we keep a collection of artifacts like that as well.
I do. I call it my New Bern artifact room.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. All right.
All right, that concludes our application hearings. Next item, general public comments. Is there anyone that would like to make any comments? Very well. Do you have any other business, Morgan, that we need to discuss?
No, just thanks, guys, for being here tonight. I know this was outside of our usual schedule and outside of our usual Wednesday meetings, but kind of have a lot to tend to.
All right. Anyone like to move that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well. We're adjourned.